Shalom, giving all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakodash, double honors unto the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that rule well, and shalom to the 144,000 elect men of the nation of Israel and the rest of the elect that are destined to be saved. I'm the brother Kalab from the GMS UK London Forecasters Camp, coming back at you with another lesson to help edify those of which I spoke of. And in this short lesson, I'm going to keep this one short, I just want to speak about something that, a conversation that I was having with a brother in the camp recently came into my head again, because it was an interesting point that I said, and I thought it would make an edifying lesson. I said something along the lines of the difference between men and women in this life is the fact that women are able to indulge in their emotions, whereas men, on the other hand, we don't have that same luxury, the luxury of indulging in our emotions. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of times problems arise in life from being too emotional about a situation rather than being the opposite of that, which would, I guess, to be more stoic minded. Let me get into these words. First, let's start with emotional. Emotional definition via dictionary says pertaining to or involving emotion or the emotions. Definition 2 is really what I want. Subject to or easily affected by emotion. To be subject to or easily affected by emotion. Now, this is something that I didn't just pull out of my arse overnight. This is something that I had to learn the hard way myself. Because obviously when you're younger in the world, oftentimes our emotions play a big part in the things that we do or the things that we pursue or partake in. Oftentimes it's based on our emotions. But I'm not an old man, but as you grow older, especially as you come into this truth, you start to realize that oftentimes emotions aren't really profitable in a lot of situations where it could be very easy to be emotional. Oftentimes emotions can cloud one's judgment and their perception and distort reality in ways which can lead to bad decision making. And I think I said briefly in my last video that oftentimes a lot of things that we deal with in life is simply information processing. And when you receive information and you process it incorrectly, that can lead to problems. It's just like doing an equation. Let's say you're trying to balance your budget. Let's say you're trying to balance your budget and you've got £100 and you see an item that is for £200 and you're like, I want that. And then you go out and you buy it, but you've put yourself £100 in debt because you spent over what you're allocated. That's not being sensible. That's being governed by your emotions. And then you've got to put yourself in a situation where you're in more trouble because then you have to work out how you're going to get out of debt. I'm just using that as one hypothetical example of how emotions can cause bad things for you. And that's not to say that we can never, under any circumstances, show emotion. No, that's not true. We can show emotion, we can express emotion, but there is many ways in which we can express our emotions, which oftentimes might not be detrimental. Sometimes it can be more expedient to express our emotions in a different way than might be what conventional people in the world do. To react with a gut reaction out that does something that could potentially sabotage yourself. That's not being wise at all. That's the complete contrary of being wise, and the complete contrary of being masculine. Let me get a few precepts here. I wanted to, before I do, let me get the word stoic. Because as we grow in this truth, we're supposed to develop a more stoic mindset. This is the definition, stoic, of relating to the school of philosophy founded by Zeno, who taught that people should be free from passion. See, again, emotions can be inflamed by passions, Free from passion, unmoved by joy or grief, and submit without complaint to unavoidable necessity. Stoic or stoical, characterized by a calm, austere fortitude befitting the Stoics, especially in the face of trouble or loss, not giving in to one's emotions. See, this is the difference between giving in to one's emotions, because emotions are like the water. If you ever stand on the beach and you see the sea, the waves coming in, and they're very movable, that's how emotions are. They're unstable. And if you're subject to your emotions, then your mindset is going to be all over the place like a pinball in the pinball machine. You're never going to be ever stable. You're always going to be bouncing from one thing to the other, never really in control of yourself. And self-control and self-discipline are really two keys that determine how successful a person can be in any endeavor. Because a lot of things that take skill require a level of discipline. Let's use tennis as an example. A lot of those players who play at Wimbledon or whatever, I don't really follow tennis or whatever, but we'll use Wimbledon as an example. Those players started when they were very young children. They learned how to play the game from a very young age, and they worked at their craft for many years until they go pro, and then they, compete in, the world tour or whatever. They've been disciplined from a very early age. Another good example would be martial arts. Children who start off early in the martial arts and follow through, to where they get themselves their qualifications in their black belt, first dan, second dan, or whatever the case may be. The only reason they can accomplish those things is because they applied discipline. Certain things can't be achieved overnight. In fact, a lot of the things that take skill in this life simply cannot be obtained overnight. An example that comes to mind is playing the guitar. I was thinking about this recently. What people who don't play the guitar don't realize is that you have to condition your hands. And it's similar if you play the piano. You have to learn how to control your fingers. And you don't realize how little control you have over your digits until you actually start trying to play a piano, or you start trying to fret a fretboard on the guitar, because you're trying to have a level of control over your hands that most people don't. And you're also trying to develop and use muscles in your hands that most people don't under normal circumstances. And the thing about the guitar is that you have to condition your hand to where your fingertips, they're going to get calloused, meaning that, you need to develop those calluses by dragging your fingers along the strings. And when you develop those calluses, it might look like blisters on your fingers. But guess what? After a while, those blisters go away. Your hands look normal, but your fingers are stronger. And your fingers can actually hold down the strings on the guitar with more ease. Because it can actually be quite painful trying to play. For a beginner trying to play the guitar, it can be quite rough on your hands. But I'm using that as an example because to get good at those things, it takes discipline. Discipline is a key component in anything that you want to achieve in this world to any degree. Even exercise. If you want to be in good shape, you have to have a disciplined exercise routine. Or having a good diet, you need to be disciplined in what you're eating. The point of that being, I'm saying all of that to say this, is that a disciplined mind is better than an emotional mind, because a disciplined mind can actually objectively assess situations and sometimes can see possibilities that an emotional mind cannot. And that also ties into the scripture which says that the carnal mind is enmity with the Most High. Let me get that one. Bear with me a second. Let's pull this up. Bear with me, I'm pulling up a precept here. This is Romans 8 and verse 6 going into verse 7. Get it on the screen here. Romans chapter 8, starting at verse 6, I'm going to read into verse 7, says this: For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against the Most High, for it is not subject to the law of the Most High, neither indeed can be. And, sometimes we need to check ourselves. Take a good look in that spiritual mirror and ask ourselves, am I being too emotional about a situation? I've been guilty of this sometimes, and I've had to check myself and be like, you know what, man? Give myself a little talking to in my head and say, you're being too emotional. Just deal with the facts of the situation. And oftentimes things work out better when that type of mindset is applied. Now, there's another scripture I want to get. I had it before. Let me pull it up. Bear with me a second. This is Proverbs 4 and verse 23. This is the one I want. Be sober-minded. I'll get in that in a second, but let me get this one first. Proverbs 4 and 23, and it says, Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And this couldn't be more true. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Now I want to look up that word heart in the blue letter. So let's go here, Proverbs 4 and 23 here. I want to get the blue letter in the word heart here, because I think it's going to go into your mind. You're like, yep, I think that's the one. Yep, there we go.
Strong's H 3820. Lave.
It says lave, but it should be la'ab, I believe. It says, in a man, mind, will, heart, understanding, inner part, mist, soul, mind, knowledge, thinking, reflection, memory, inclination, resolution, determination, conscience, heart of moral character, seat of appetites. There you go. Seat of appetites. That's an important one because, every man has their various appetites for things in life. It's different from one man to another, but we can't be too given over to those things because our appetites without proper measure can end up destroying us. Seat of emotions and passions. There you go. Strong's definitions: a form of the heart, also used figuratively, very widely for the feelings, the will, and even the intellect. Likewise for the center of anything, care for, comfortably, consent, considered. Jumping down, wisdom. I'm going to go into all that. But the scriptures say, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And this is something that women have a very hard time doing, controlling their emotions. But guess what? That's how the Most High made them. And children, they're allowed to engage and indulge in their emotions. But oftentimes, as men, there are consequences associated with being too given over to our appetites or our emotions. Oftentimes the key to success in a situation is about being able to look at the bigger picture, to look at the long game. A really good example of this is, funnily enough, I was talking to another brother recently about some particular films I've been watching recently. So I've been watching some gangster films. Usually I'm not into that genre, but recently I've wanted to increase my cultural awareness and understanding. So I've been watching a lot of films that usually I wouldn't watch. And I was watching The Godfather Parts 1 and Part 2. And I actually really enjoyed those films. In fact, I'll probably watch them again. I changed my opinion on that genre of film. I could actually see a lot of good lessons to be learned from those films. And the thing is with me is when I like to watch movies, I like to always ponder on what the moral of the story is. Or when I read a book or anything, I've always been like, okay, what was the meaning behind that? Or what was the deeper subtext in this story? That's what really excites me about things. So when I was watching The Godfather Part 2, what I really liked about that film is that a lot of the story was told without dialogue. It was told through a lot of acting with the eyes and body language. And in a lot of situations, there was a lot that could be inferred from characters simply by their body language, although they didn't even say a word. And that's what I really liked about the film, because I like body language and reading things like that anyway. But the point of the matter is that the main character in the movie, I believe his name is Michael Corleone, the guy who's played by Al Pacino, oftentimes he didn't do things out of emotions, where a lot of other characters in the story, they were given to their emotions and just doing crazy shit, which ultimately for a lot of them ended up getting them destroyed. But Michael, on the other hand, the main character, he didn't act on his emotions. He clearly had them, but he was more stoic about it. And oftentimes he wouldn't let his enemies know what he was thinking or what he was planning. And that gave him his strength. And it's no different in life. If you're always emotional about stuff, first of all, you become very predictable. And secondly, you end up creating situations for yourself that can often make things worse. Whereas on the other hand, if you apply a more stoic mindset and you're more reserved in how you express your emotions, you kind of give yourself you give yourself more a better position. A better position because then you can make better decisions. Because emotionally made decisions are often bad ones. What does the scripture say? For out of the heart is deceitfully wicked. Let's get that. Bear with me while I pull it up. Yeah, this is where I want to go. This is Jeremiah 17 and 19. Let's get that on the screen. Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 19 says... No, 17 and verse 9, forgive me. Jeremiah 17 and verse 9 says, the heart is deceitfully... let me read that again. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And if you remember, I blue lettered the word heart, and that means your mind. Therefore, the mind is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Now, let me give you an example of how deceptive your mind can be. Let's say you took somebody and you asked them, let's say you took them in the street and asked them to draw a picture of what they see. If they hadn't studied how to see, they'd make a picture which would have a lot of mistakes in it. Maybe one object would be bigger than it should be in relation to another. Maybe there's no perspective. There's no 3 dimensions to things. They're just drawing, flat shapes, squares, triangles, circles, rather than three-dimensional geometric forms, which is how things actually appear in the world. Now, Why would they be doing that? Well, it's because of this scripture. The heart is deceitful above things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? In order to be able to draw an image that looks something like reality, means that you have to actually understand how to see and understand how your eyes can deceive your mind into thinking that an object looks like a certain way when in reality it doesn't. Or another example would be if you took someone and they weren't a musician and they said, yeah, I really love this song. You could ask them, do you remember the song? They say, yeah, I love it. It's my favourite song. And then you say, okay, sit in front of the piano and play it. You know, if they didn't have the discipline, if they hadn't trained their mind to put away the discipline of their emotions, they wouldn't be able to do it, because that's essentially what I'm saying. Discipline is needful in all things, and especially in the truth. Especially in the truth. We have to be masters of our own emotions. Now there's a scripture here which says, man that hath no rule over his own spirit. Bear with me a second. Bear with me a second. Come on, man, stop fucking around. So lucky this isn't getting the scripture I want. Come on, don't mess with me, man. It's the thing is, bear with me while I pull up this precept. There we go. Proverbs 25 and 20. I had to spell it correctly. Proverbs 25 and verse 28 says this. There we go. Proverbs 25 and 28. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. So if you imagine a city that has no walls, it means it can be besieged by anyone and anything. You know, anyone can just run up in there and create havoc and mayhem, and you've got no defenses, man. And that's how a man who's given over to too much of his emotions is. He's always going to be the victim. He's always going to be never in control. See, and this is the thing, like, in order to be a good leader, the first thing you have to learn to lead is yourself. If you've got no rule over yourself, how can you successfully have a rule over other people? Now, here we are, being of the hopeful elect. We're all being conditioned and taught, Lord willing, if we be of the elect, we're all being conditioned and taught to be leaders, because in the kingdom of heaven, it's going to be the elect in the position of rulership over the other nations and the rest of the nation of Israel. So if you can't, on this side of things, in this training mode time, because that's what I kind of call it, this life is kind of like training mode for the kingdom, because that's when life will really begin in the kingdom. If you're failing and fucking up at the test right now, where you can't control your emotions and you're always maybe flying off at the handle over the smallest thing, or you know, you're always looking to get your lick back and all this kind of shit, how can you be a fit ruler in the kingdom if you couldn't rule yourself on this side? And really, that's really what our job is, you know, because although we go out and we preach and we teach our nation the scriptures and stuff, really the battle is within all of us, and we all have our crosses to bear, and we all have to win this personal fight. For example, there comes a point when we have to conquer our own inner demons, and nobody can come and rescue them. Nobody can come and rescue us from them. You know, a great example is, you know, you might be a child at school and there's a bigger kid, pushing you around, and maybe you've got an older brother or a cousin at the school who can come and sort him out for you, yeah? And then you end up relying on him to stop people from picking on you. And then one day, they're no longer around and you have to defend yourself. Who are you going to run to? There's nobody to help you. You have to learn to fight your own battles, essentially. And a lot of our battles are the battles within. A lot of it takes place in our mind. And external things are simply extensions of those things that take place within our own mind. A lot of external situations can kind of reflect what's going on in a person's mind. And that's why it's important to have good perception of things. And good perception of things comes from being not too emotional. I'm not saying we can't engage in emotions. We all should, because we're human. Even the Most High has emotions. He hates, he loves, He's got Most High has emotions. He made us to be emotional. But guess what? He gave the full spectrum of emotions over to women. But for the men, he wanted the men, to be sober. Let's get that one, be sober. Bear with me a second. Putting it up on the screen. Because a person can actually be drunk on their own emotions. Let me read 1 Peter 1 and 13. First Peter chapter 1 and 13 says, "Wherefore gird up the loins of your mind." Forgive me, I'm going to have to go in a second. There's someone who wants my attention. It says 1 Peter 1 and 13, "Wherefore gird up the loins of your mind." See, it all starts in the head. "Be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Yahushua HaMashiach. As obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lusts in your ignorance, but as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation." Now, again, when we was in the world, we were all given over to our emotions. Maybe we'd fly off the handle about this. Maybe we'd fall in love with women a little bit too easily. And giving all our strength over to women who didn't deserve it, and ultimately ended up, causing us more harm than good. And, there's all manner of ways in which emotions can be destructive. But the thing is, when we come into the truth, we're supposed to put away all of that and be more sober, be more stoic, be more masculine, and therefore, when we adopt that mindset, we actually gain more power. See, when you're too emotional, you actually lose in your power. But when you're stoic, you can retain your power because you stop making stupid moves. You stop making bad decisions. You start to calculate, okay, what's the risk versus the reward? Is the juice worth the squeeze, as they say? Whereas someone who's too emotional, they just think about the pleasure all the time. Oh, well, this is pleasurable, so I'll do it. Oh, and I'll do that, and I'll do a bit of that, and I'll do a bit of that. And they're running all over the place with, no control over themselves, given over to their passions, and it can end up destroying them. So I can end the lesson. I could talk more about this subject, but I think I've made the points. The points being is that as men in this truth, emotions are a luxury that we can't really afford to overindulge in. Women can indulge in their emotions as much as they like, and there's very few consequences to be had of it, but that's the woman's portion. That's not the man's portion. The man's portion is really to be the head, to be the leader of the household, and ultimately, if we are indeed of the elect, to be the leaders of the nation and the nations, because we're going to be over the nations in the kingdom. So really, leadership starts within. Good leadership starts within. You have to first learn how to control yourself and have discipline over yourself. And in doing so, then you'll be able to see correctly, to you know, be able to give good advice to others, or, you know, give discipline to others. You know, it all starts at home. You know, it all starts inside, because a lot of the battles we face are within, and a lot of the demons that trouble us are within our own minds. But those are the crosses that we each individually have to bear. Every brother's got a different cross, but every person's cross has been tailor-made for them by Yahweh, by Shem Yahweh Shai. So, you know, we all face different trials and tribulations, but it's all from the Most High. And Lord willing, we can overcome them. And the scriptures have already said that the elect will indeed overcome. And Yahweh Shai overcame as well. He overcame this world. So, you know, we're seeking to follow in his footsteps. And in the end, ultimately, the elect will get the victory. So Lord willing, that was edifying. Kind of just speaking in the spirit about a few things that I was meditating on. So Lord willing, it was edifying. So with that, I want to give all praises, honor and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rahakodash, double honors unto the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that rule well, and Shalom unto the 144,000 elect men of the nation of Israel, and the rest of the elect that are destined to be saved. And I'll catch you in the next lesson, Lord willing. Shalom for now.